Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome back to the High Rise, a laid-back, data-back conversation where we talk all things cannabis, from U.S. MSOs to Canadian LPs, products and markets through the lens of data. My name is Cy with Headset, and I'm joined, as always, by Emily Paxia of Poseidon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the High Rise.
And today we have a very special guest. We're joined by John Hartmann, CEO of Ascend Wellness. Welcome to the High Rise, John.
Great to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you both today.
Yeah, it's great, especially this week with earnings calls, and I know you've been busy with all that entails. So definitely excited to kind of get into the business. But first, why don't we start? You've been in the sector for 4 months now, which probably feels like a good couple years. So I'd love to, kind of learn a bit more about yourself, your background, and how you came to cannabis.
For sure, Sai. So look, I think it's actually not quite been 3 full months yet, but closing in on that 4-month mark. It's been a terrific beginning for me with the Ascend team. I actually spent the first almost 8 full weeks on the road, and joking about planes, trains, and automobiles around the entire network of Ascend, from our 31 dispensaries in each and every one of our cultivation and production facilities across 7 states. So it's been a really great way to get grounded into the business.
That's great. And prior to cannabis, where did you come from? I know you've got a diverse background, particularly in retail. So what was right before Ascend?
Yeah, maybe it makes sense to just give you the quick timeline. I started my corporate career in pharmaceutical distribution with a company called Cardinal Health, and after several great years there, I moved on to Home Depot and spent time at Home Depot, first on the retail side and then on the M&A team, and then ultimately on the wholesale side of the business with HD Supply, before transitioning down to the very bottom of the world and working and running a large retail organization in New Zealand for several years. And then I spent not quite a decade as a CEO of True Value Hardware in Chicago before heading back east and running the Bye Bye Baby division of Bed Bath & Beyond for the last couple of years before joining Ascend.
Amazing. What was that like in New Zealand? What a transition.
Everyone asks that question, and if it's not on your bucket list and you're a traveler, it's got to be top 3. It's an amazing place. It's a beautiful country. There's beautiful people. It's a terrific food culture. And as an island, or as a set of islands surrounded by amazing oceans, there's a plentiful bounty of fresh seafood, and it's a beautiful place.
Yeah,
amazing.
So I'm dying to go, and as a sailor, it's like sailing Mecca. The sailors there are treated like Super Bowl stars here.
Yeah, it is.
So
it is a water culture: sailing, boating, swimming. It's amazing. Yeah.
So cool. I was so excited. We've been long and early investors in Ascend, and I know we were in a CEO search for quite a long time, as a lot of the founders of these companies, I think, never had designs to be long CEOs for these businesses. They wanted to get it stood up and then bring in people with interesting experiences and acumen to lend to the growth of the business at this stage going forward. I'm curious, and I was so excited because it is one of the things, like, I think people don't understand how cool and interesting and complex this industry is. But from your perspective, what are the through lines of your prior career experiences and how you decided to get into cannabis, and specifically with Ascend?
Yeah, it's a great question, Emily. Look, I think one of the reasons that I ended up with Ascend, and I'll tell you openly a little bit more about that in a moment, but one of the reasons that I ended up here, just from a personal perspective, was the absolute overlap for me with my past skills and what I believe is needed in this business, what the company and the board felt was needed in this business. So, at this juncture in my career, having a really substantial personal impact is super important to me. Titles mean less, other things mean less, but actually being able to influence an organization, build a great team, be effective, and have some fun along the way is what's really, top priority for me at this point. And if you look back, and as I did, and I think as the board did, reflect on my background, it's a blend of wholesale distribution. It's with a little bit of manufacturing sprinkled in, and a heavy dose of retail. And so for me, the common threads that run through what was and now what is that blend of wholesale, manufacturing, and retail. And then how did I specifically end up here? Look, I think, candidly speaking, I had a phenomenal opportunity as part of the Bed Bath & Beyond organization to run the Bye Bye Baby division. And it's it's an amazing specialty retail business, which was in average condition when I took the business over in 2020. And we had a great run. We put a great team together, really turned around some lagging retail performance, and had the best year in the business in 2021. And then sadly, the demise of Bed Bath, which has been well documented in everything from the Wall Street Journal to every other business journal, really completely took down the Bye Bye Baby division with it, which is just a sad and was actually an unnecessary outcome. So I was, I was looking for my next opportunity after having left the company last September, and was fortunate to have some great opportunities under consideration when the recruiting firm that the board hired for this search contacted me. And look, I think my initial reaction was, I don't have any experience in the cannabis industry, and would I be a fit? But the more I learned, and having met each of the board members, the more I did my own diligence on cannabis in general and on Ascend specifically, and then as part of the process had the opportunity to visit our Barry, Illinois cultivation and production facility. It was an incredibly impressive visit, which gave me a real hands-on, firsthand view of the professional level of cultivation that's going on in most of the industry, and the complexity of the business, which really, really piqued all the things that I'm curious about.
Yeah, I noticed, when you mentioned Home Depot, and I mean, all of these businesses, I'm sure at some point in time we're going through or navigating, these unique circumstances. And Home Depot, at the time you were there, I feel like was the time when e-commerce was really getting a lot of traction, the kind of early 2000s. And I'm sure that was, quite disruptive for an organization like Home Depot. And I think about the cannabis industry, and I feel like it's perpetually getting disrupting itself, just always changing. Every market, every region is slightly different. So, do you enjoy that kind of atmosphere? I mean, you've taken on so many challenges. I mean, moving to New Zealand, for example, completely different culture and probably a slightly different business culture. Is that something that you enjoy, and also something that attracted you to this space?
Absolutely. So I think the parallel with Home Depot is an interesting one, not only e-commerce, but also from the four walls, kind of traditional brick and mortar retail. This was a time in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. Home Depot was opening like a couple stores a week, sometimes a store a day, along with the rapidly growing and expanding e-commerce opportunity. So, look, I'm by nature a curious person. I enjoy learning new things and understanding and breaking down and simplifying what can be, in some cases, some complex issues in business, and putting the right team on the field to attack those opportunities is actually what motivates me. And it wouldn't surprise you that in the post earnings period here over the last couple of days, in the typical calls we have with analysts and investors, I've said on a number of those calls, I'm more fired up today, 90, 100 days in, than I was on my first day. It's as I've learned more, as I've gotten a deeper understanding of the opportunities, notwithstanding the severe regulatory issues that the overall industry faces. I'm very bullish on not only the industry, but where Ascend specifically has the opportunity to go in the future.
Yeah. Well, I want to come back to that, but can we talk a little bit about your great roadshow across all of the different assets of the company? I think, one of the things as a person who's been involved in trying to find leadership for the industry, this is, I would say, this isn't one of those industries where you can manage everything from behind a computer. You have to really get out there and get in the field. And it is one of the things I actually love the most about this industry is the people, getting to meet the people who are growing cannabis, who are manufacturing it, who are in the retail environments. And like, for example, last week when I was at the Montclair store and I got to meet the retail manager there, Alex, who had come from the medical market and came over, and there's a lot of enthusiasm in this market. But so curious to hear after that grand tour some of the things that struck you, anything that surprised you, what you think maybe people outside of the industry don't know. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about that, but just curious to hear.
Emily, that's a great question. And look, I think there were more than a few eye rolls when I said I'm going to visit every one of our dispensaries and each of our cultivation and production facilities in my first month. But we set out on a path to do it, and it was a great couple of months. So I learned a lot. First and foremost, my style is, while today we're interacting with me doing a lot of the talking, my style is, particularly initially, is to listen and learn. And I had just an amazing array of Ascend associates in our cultivation and production facilities and in each and every one of our dispensaries, as well as across our corporate functions, sharing with me their passion about the business, what's working well, what's not working, what are the opportunities. And I think that these weren't just like the new CEO showing up at a dispensary, taking a few pictures, patting a few backs, and kind of moving on. I spent 6 to 7 weeks doing this because I was investing the time to listen and learn. So these were detailed conversations, and for me, new to cannabis, I was not only learning about the process, in some cases the complexities of the process of growing and producing our products, to the customer's journey in the retail stores. And a big part of this first couple of months for me was actually working in our facilities. And I mean, not just like for a few minutes. Like I spent 2 full days, not just touring one of our cultivation facilities, but 2 full 8-hour days, 10-hour days in our Franklin, New Jersey facility, working in the mom room, working, in propagation, working in flower, and understanding the, each and every stage of the grow and production process. Made my first, cooked my first batch of gummies in the kitchen under good supervision, and so forth. So, and similarly in the retail stores, working POS, picking orders in the vault, helping check in orders from our own deliveries, as well as our third party partners' products being checked in. So I got a real terrific grounding in many of the aspects of the business. And I think big takeaways for me, I'll give you the biggest, and then I'll pause and see, what you'd like to, drive into next. But for me, just the passion and the professionalism of our associates in the cultivation facilities and in our stores just was really an eye opener for me. Having been around wholesale distribution, having been around retail, it is, as you mentioned, your experience in one of our dispensaries just this past week was a very positive one. That was my experience in each and every one of the locations that I visited.
That's great to hear. And I do want to touch on kind of your comments around focusing on the customer experience and the associates you have, and what how you think that they can continue to drive the business. But before we maybe get into that, I thought it'd be good to just talk a little bit about Ascend. I'm sure our listeners are pretty well in tune with the organization, but I feel like companies like Ascend are always growing, always introducing new products to market, opening up new stores. So in this tour, like what markets is Ascend in? Are there certain markets that you're in a larger way than others? And yeah, I know you mentioned the retail and wholesale, but just kind of a high level overview would be great to kind of level set the listeners on where Ascend is at today.
Terrific. So we're currently in 7 markets, and we're vertically integrated in 6 of those 7 markets. I know our listeners understand what that means, but it means we have a grow in 6 of those 7 markets. We are in Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And then most recently, we added 4 dispensaries in Maryland just in advance of the adult use flip on July 1st. In fact, my last stop on my tour, my AWH tour, was in Maryland the week of the actual, the week leading up to Saturday, July 1st, which was the go live for adult use in Maryland. So exciting way to put the icing on the cake of the AWH tour. So 7 states, 6 vertically integrated, 31 current dispensaries across those markets. 9 in Illinois, the state maximum in Massachusetts and New Jersey, 3 each, 8 in Michigan, currently 2 in Pennsylvania, as well as 2 in Ohio, and as I mentioned, 4 in Maryland. We have, again, public knowledge, as we've discussed in our earnings as recently as Tuesday. We have 8 dispensaries currently under construction. So we'll be, toward the end of this year, we'll be approaching that 40 dispensary mark.
That's great. Thanks. That's super helpful. So let's get back to that. Your experience with your team and kind of that enthusiasm in the production side, in the retail side. Companies are just groups of people working towards a common goal, right? So it's always great to have people that are enthusiastic about that goal. So, what are you thinking about that, and how does that overlap with your experience in other retail and working with the associates in those spaces?
Terrific question. I think what I'd start my response with, Sai, is something that I've shared routinely around the network, the deeper I've gotten into the business, and that is the Ascend team has a lot to be proud of, and I say that for a couple of reasons. One, because it's just a plain fact, and it's something that rapidly growing companies rarely actually take a breath and take a second and kind of understand the journey they've been on, because the pace is exciting, but it also is something that you have to thoughtfully do to pause and reflect. And I've been super meaningful about ensuring that the team understands that this fresh set of eyes from outside of cannabis thinks incredibly highly about what's been accomplished. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One is, as I said, because it's just the truth. The second is that I was brought to the company not for what's been, but for what can be. And so from a cultural perspective, my role is to support the organization and take down barriers, the ones that we control, to accelerate our growth and accelerate our profitability. And so to do that, I firmly believe, and I've seen this played out in other really successful companies before, like the Home Depot. When you really empower your associates, when you really put an intense focus on the team that you put on the field, whether it's in production or whether it's in the retail customer facing part of the business, or whether it's in a corporate function, they end up being better customer focused individuals and employees, and they then therefore deliver an exceptional customer experience. So what does that mean? I mean, a lot of words, but what does it mean? When we connect individually and collectively with our grow team, with our production team around and share with them the information that comes back to us from our customers who are consuming our products, it's a very empowering and it's a very powerful thing to help drive new thoughts, new ideas, new creativity, and efficiencies in the business. Similarly, on the retail side, when you are constantly focused on your customer, when you're working back from your customer and what his and her experiences are in your stores, on your website, on your menu. When you start with the customer and work back from there, it's an incredibly powerful thing to share with your associates the ways that we can improve that experience for our customers. So, look, I think I'll be leveraging some very interesting experiences that I've had in the past, leading teams through this focus on the customer, building teams to focus on how they support one another and serving the customer. In the results are, the results flow from there. So I'm super I am super focused on ensuring that the Ascend team is mindful of all the greatness that has been achieved. I mean, look, we've gone from a dead stop about 4.5, 5 years ago to a run rate company at $500 million of profitable revenue. And the future is ours to double that in the coming years. And I think that by leveraging what's been done with a focus on the customer and our associates, we're gonna make the path forward a lot easier for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Well
Yeah,
said.
it's interesting. I feel like the the public markets have have been tortured for the last 30 months in cannabis. And one of the things that I talk with a lot of founders pretty periodically to kind of talk about what we're seeing in the market. And one of the things I was coming out of this earnings calls, there's many things coming out of these earnings calls already, is that these are real businesses. And I think a lot of people forget too that in the world of business, Ascend is almost like a startup in terms of its lifetime of existence. But yet these companies go from zero to hundreds of millions of revenue in a very short time, and with really interesting profiles of the business in terms of gross margins, EBITDA, all these things that, and then yet in spite of all of the friction points that make it so hard to get to those, free cash flow moments and the taxes. But I guess, like you mentioned, you use the word results. I thought the cube was very interesting, and what is interesting too is, just on a sidebar, is that all of these companies have traditionally traded as almost like one company. It's like they're all the same from the outside, I think, for people, but we're getting much, much clearer on how the companies are actually quite different in many, many ways, including how they're allocating resources, how they're thinking about what their goals and objectives are, how they're thinking about, to your point, retail strategy and product strategy. But and I know there were a lot of questions about those things on the calls, but just thinking about Q3, what would you say are some of the highlights of the quarter? What are some of the things that you as a team are really focused on driving forward in the next quarters coming up?
Look, I think the the second quarter results are a good indicator of what's to come for the next couple of quarters for us. When a company like Ascend is able to increase net revenue by over 25% year on year, similarly from a wholesale perspective, have super positive double-digit growth as well. It's a great sign that the foundation of the business is in really good shape. And I think the reason for that is the approach that Ascend has taken to focus on these current 7 markets. So Ascend is specifically not taking the shotgun approach. These are all markets that the company has entered either along with adult use, or in the case of Ohio and Pennsylvania, states that are on the cusp of, we believe, near-term flip to adult use. And I think Maryland is an extremely positive example of entering a market, a medical market, on the very cusp of adult use, and rapidly ramping up those assets to for the adult use flip on July 1st. So I think what you should expect from us in the next couple of quarters is a continued focus on growing our retail business, a continued focus on growing our wholesale business, both grew in the quarter, or excuse me, grew year over year, immensely, and on a quarter-on-quarter basis as well. Very, very positive growth. 7% growth on the net revenue side, and 5% growth on the gross wholesale side. So, I think what you'll see is a continued focus on our execution of our wholesale and retail strategies. At the same time, we have a lot of work underway on the new dispensaries that are coming to our markets. I think I shared with you that we have 8 currently under construction. We have 1 in Illinois, we have 3 in Ohio, and we have 4 in Pennsylvania that are in various stages of construction. So a lot of focus on growing in the markets that we're currently already in, while our M&A team very carefully and very judiciously assesses additional markets that we may consider entering.
Yeah, and just to correct everybody, I think I said Q3 earnings calls because we're in Q3, but I meant Q2 earnings calls, just in case anybody's listening, so they are clear on where we are
Living in
this.
the future. I love it.
I'm already looking forward. This is the way we do it.
Emily, the other thing that I'd add to your question, which is a good one, is that a couple of highlights in the quarter that I think deserve just an additional comment. I think it was our third quarter in a row of north of 1 million transactions. So a really healthy sign that we're growing transactions in our current markets. The other focus that I would shine the spotlight on for a second is cash flow. I think cash is king, super critical to particularly in an early stage business like cannabis, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. It was our second quarter with positive cash flow. We're looking at, and I think we've signaled that it's our expectation that will continue for the balance of the year and into the future. So just a couple of really good signs about the overall health of the business, while we continue to try to grow in a capital constrained in a densely regulated industry.
Yeah, and we track a lot of these markets at Headset in aggregate, and not every market, not every state or province out there in Canada is doing particularly well, and so it's great to see these kind of numbers coming out of Ascend and where you guys are at, that you're operating not only in a cash constrained space, but in a space where there is some contraction happening in a lot of states out there. So the team should be very proud of what they have accomplished so far. Given this tour, I have to imagine, obviously you saw a lot of Ascend, you saw all of Ascend. Maybe you saw some other kind of businesses in the space, or you've looked at it. And I'd be curious to get your opinion on, where are we at as an industry? Is particularly with the like retail experiences, brands, all these things that are trying to be developed, as we get cannabis to look more like a traditional consumer packaged goods space. How do you think we are we doing a great job? On the one side, I feel like cannabis does a great job of adopting, things because it's new and it's easy to say, okay, well, let's rethink how we do these things. On the other hand, sometimes I feel like, we're pulled back and, doing some things that maybe aren't great, but it's a spectrum of business types, right? There's obviously like the Ascends of the world, and then there's the small mom and pops too, right? So did you get a chance to look at any of the kind of landscape, and what's your general assessment of how it looks to you coming from the outside?
Look, great question. I think the most interesting thing for me, and what really differentiates cannabis, I think, largely from most of traditional retail, is the state by state approach that it's kind of grown. And that, look, it's just a logical outcome of where we are from a regulatory perspective. But typically in retail, you see companies that are successful have a very similar approach. And we do, as Ascend, we have a similar approach in the 7 states that we're in. But because we're, nothing crosses state lines, everything's slightly unique and different. And I think as the maturity curve has happened for cannabis across the states where it's legal. You have some incredibly mature markets. Obviously, the ones out west are incredibly mature, and the ones in the Northeast are catching up. So I think that's of interest for me. More directly to your question, look, I think I believe some of the cannabis companies out there do a really good job. I think that comparatively speaking, I'm slightly prejudiced toward what Ascend has done, and I think with good reason that our retail presence is an exceptional one. There are other very good competitors in the space, and I'm not the person that says we're it and no one else is. That's not me at all. But I think there is a wide variety of dispensaries that I've seen in more than the 7 states that we operate in, that I've visited in other parts of the country. And I think so. If your question about kind of what can we do as an industry, well, one of the things that for us at Ascend is we are intently focused on the customer experience. I think that is evidenced by the retail environments that we're creating. They are uplifting. They are modern. I've had many people reflect that going into some of our newer stores is like going into an Apple store, but with a cannabis focus. They're super pleasant retail environments. So I think that they're not all like that, and as an industry, we'll continue to grow and evolve. There are some great players out there, and our view at Ascend is that we want to continue to be a leader in the space.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Emily.
Nice. Oh yeah, sorry, I was having a mute
Okay.
thing. Great. So, I think this was a really good introduction to your experience and to your time at Ascend in the industry. So as a way to wrap up, we're always trying to understand what excites people about what's coming in the future. So what is it for you that's really exciting you about cannabis and about Ascend and about the whole industry for the future?
I think, Emily, there are some very near-term things that we're working on. A new product launch that's coming soon that I'm very excited about. So from a tactical perspective, ways to introduce new products and experiences for our customers is always something that I'm super passionate about and very excited about. And then more broadly speaking, I'm very excited about the opportunities that we have ahead. I think that 90 days in, I'm more energized and more excited about the opportunities. I've absolutely validated my own personal due diligence that I did on the company before joining, and I have a very high level of confidence that as great as this initial phase of growth has been for Ascend, we have plenty within our control over the next 2 to 3 years to continue this great trajectory. And then I think more broadly, I'm cautiously optimistic that at the federal level, there will be some form of relief, whether it's with reclassification, safe banking, or one of the other regulatory changes that will at some point have a positive effect on the industry and allow some of the things that I've taken for granted in the last couple of decades, like being able to deduct normal operating expenses, like being able to use a credit card for allowing my customers to transact in store and online, like being able to leverage our assets across state lines. I think that when that happens, I think there'll be a massive influx of investment in the industry, which will only help us better serve our customers with even more focus. So those are some of the things I'm thinking of. Very tactical in the near term. What are some of the great quick wins and early opportunities we have in the business? How do we build the roadmap for the next 1 to 3 years to continue the great trajectory of the Ascend organization and build on this great foundation of assets that we have. And then, in the hopefully not too distant future, see some regulatory relief for an industry that deserves it.
It absolutely does. Well, thanks so much, John, for joining. It was great to get to know a little bit more about your background, your time at Ascend, and all the great things you guys have going on there. As I mentioned before the recording, we're always excited when smart, successful people join the sector, from more traditional industries. It really just helps, elevate the whole thing. So welcome to cannabis, and look forward to seeing what you accomplish.
Cy, Emily, thank you both so much for having me today.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.